Hi there, welcome to another episode of the Colton Boutique Show. With me today, all the way in Puerto Rico, hopefully I've pronounced that correct, John, is the CEO of the biggest wine auction house in the world, Acker, Mr. John Kapon. John, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Great to be here.
Well, great for you to be here as well. And if we're to get to it, 2020 was a challenging year for everyone due to the ongoing pandemic. However, the wine auction market, and Acker in particular, went on to have a record year with 32% year-on-year growth, generating $122 million in sales. Despite all the uncertainty, what were the main factors that contributed to Acker's success in 2020?
Well, 2020 obviously was a year unlike any other, and I think the biggest thing that we did that was the most important thing was just to continue on and to keep on keeping on, so to speak, because a lot of people started canceling things. There was a lot of uncertainty. There were a lot of what are we going to do? What should we do? What should we do? And we just decided to immediately keep doing what we were doing. We already had a couple of auctions planned for late March and early April, and other companies were canceling events and postponing. And we said, we have these planned. We're not just going to roll up and die. Let's just keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, people, wanted to participate. They needed stuff to do, even though it was in a virtual manner and at home. So, to keep on was like the best thing that we did.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. And talking about this year, 2021, you've just come off the back of some very strong results in Hong Kong, Delaware. Did you achieve your quarter one target of the $40 million? And with these results and wider confidence around the market, are you expecting another record-breaking year?
Absolutely. Well, the first quarter is not exactly over, but we estimate that we will exceed the 40 million Q1. We have one more big auction next weekend in Hong Kong, a single seller sale that should hit over 8 million US. So if that happens, we'll be well on our way past 40 million for the first quarter. So yeah, we have amazing sales lined up for April, for May, for June already even. So I think we're going to have our greatest 6 months ever, and this year should exceed last year's record total.
Well, very good. Very good. And Acker have been running for over 200 years and having successfully navigated events such as the Long Depression, the Wall Street crash of 29, Black Monday, the US housing bubble, the Lehman Brothers collapse, and China's anti-gift giving policy. How has COVID compared to some of those historic challenges? And in your opinion, has the past experience helped Acker to adapt, improvise, and overcome the current situation?
Well, it's, I remember the financial crisis, certainly. I mean, the big difference between the financial crisis and COVID was the financial crisis. We had to lower prices. We had to lower estimates. I mean, there was a real swoon there for a few months. But it really was only like a 6-month kind of thing. Things went down, we adjusted down, and then they slowly started creeping back up, and then they took off. And that was right when we started in, China, which wasn't as affected by the financial crisis as, certainly the Western world. Mm-hmm. And, the difference with COVID, the market really never stopped going. There wasn't this recalibration. There wasn't this, let's lower prices, let's change anything that we're doing. So in that regard, the wine business was very fortunate because, people were staying home and they wanted to drink more than ever. There's not much else to do except to stay home and drink. So, people were buying more, they were participating, they were home, they're not spending money on vacations and dining out and all these other secondary items that people spend on it for enjoyment. So wine kind of picked up a lot of that benefit, and a lot more people were tuned in.
No, for sure. We've seen that too. And I think this year as well, because we're seeing that too. And I'm not surprised, going back to a comment you made earlier about Acker look to have their strongest start to a year, or strongest 6 months ever, because we're still going through the vaccination process. people are still uncertain about a second wave, third wave, fourth wave, 100th wave, whatever. And like you correctly stated, we're seeing it as well. A lot of our clients who aren't going on holiday, who are not maybe buying a second or third car because they don't need to travel, because they cannot travel. Instead, they're funding their passion by just buying more and more fine wine, which is never a bad thing. Never a bad thing. But within the last couple of years, you launched the In Bond in London initiative. How did that come about and how does it work?
Well, basically, we were, getting more collections and more wines in London. There's a lot of wines in London. So we were offering to have the wines in London and stay in London, before when the collections came from London. It was well received, and the trade in London really liked it. A few key players, and also, some clients like the idea of building their collection and holding it in London. That kind of changed with the tariffs and the pandemic and such. And, so it really hasn't been something that we've continued to do. But in the meantime, we've kind of started to plant our seeds in London, and we've hired a few people, and we've opened up an office there, and we're kind of, it's a major hub, and we're getting a lot of wines from London. So we're kind of increasing our footprint all around the world, including London. So that was a nice precursor for that.
And when you speak of increasing footprint as well, just a side note here, obviously there's a lot of talk about emerging economies, and through conversations I've had with people at auction, they note in particular that South America is slowly becoming a hub. For your records, are you seeing that with such like Brazil, potentially Mexico, or not really?
Yeah, no, Brazil is huge for us. I've been to Brazil maybe 20 times, so I have a lot of great clients down there, and friends. They're into it. I mean, certainly the two superpowers are, the U.S. and China. As far as the buying side goes, they're each about 40% of the market, and Europe is about 10%. Still some strong buyers in Europe, and Brazil is like 5%, and the rest of the world is the other 5%. So it's very concentrated. The wine buying game is very kind of a superpower oriented world.
Yeah.
And the selling side, we get a lot of great collections come from Europe. The great thing about Europe is there is still so much great wine tucked away in various places, not to mention in Bond in London, so to speak. But still a lot of great wine. So more wine sources from Europe, but certainly the buyers are, really U.S. and China are dominating.
No, for sure. Okay. And toward the end of last year, it was announced that Acker are launching the Acker Wines platform. And our analysts here at Colton Boutique, they love, the ease of use and the access of data of that. But for those who are unaware, what is it and how does it work?
Well, basically, it's a bunch of indices that we set up based on our historical market data. I mean, we have, 20 years, close to 1.4 billion, of wine trades at auction. So it's a huge amount of data, and we've done an enormous amount of, lots, every year, tens of thousands of lots, 250,000, 300,000 bottles of fine and rare wine every year. So all these are data points. So they set up, our CEO, Irv Goldman, set up the, he comes from the markets, and he's kind of set these platforms up based on different producers and different, categories. So it's great. He kind of compare it to the stock market and other comparative tools on there. So it's a lot of fun if you're researching wine and prices. And then the moral of the story is the price always goes up. So
that's what we like to hear. That's what we like to hear. Very good. And on the subject of Irving Goldman, who's Acker's CEO, he said there is no platform in the industry like it. So for some, they may say there is LiveX. However, what I'd really like to know is what makes Acker's wine market platform different to LiveX's platform?
Well, we just have a lot more data and a lot more reference points and a lot more historical points. I mean, LiveX was dominated by Bordeaux first, and it still is really. I mean, I think it's gotten a little more diversity, but they just don't have the breadth and scope of wines being traded that we have had historically. I mean, we've had everything and anything. And so, I mean, from A to Z, I mean, so I think that the amount of trades, the amount of wines, the amount of data, the breadth of what we've historically sold is really unparalleled in the entire wine market.
There's been a big push in recent times for equality across all industries. And Acker really stood out in terms of balance within senior roles within the company. And you recently launched the virtual Women in Wine tastings. How's that been going so far, and what can people expect to experience by signing up?
Well, it's a great series. It's hosted by one of our star women employees. There's lots of them, Lily Mirabelle Friedman, and she's done interviews with Anne Colgan and Veronique Drouin and Martine Saunier and Jordan Salcido, who's amazing. So many great women. I think there's about a dozen or more, and they're available. You can view them on YouTube or on our Instagram channel, and it's just great. I mean, for us, I mean, there are a lot of senior employees at Acker are women. Our chief marketing officer is a woman. Our chief financial officer is a woman. General counsel is a woman. So it's just, diversity is just part of life. Growing up in New York City, you can't help but appreciate diversity. So it's never really been, a thing for me, whether it's clients, employees, what race you are, it doesn't really matter. It's just who you are as a person on the inside. And so we're very blessed to have a very inclusive company with a lot of different ethnicities and genders.
We should end the podcast right there. That was that was beautiful. Very well put. No, it's true. Being in London, obviously it's not as big as New York, but diversification is key. And like you said, without trying to get too political, with what we're seeing across the world, with too many issues to do with ethnicity, religious beliefs, race, if you judge someone by the way in which they treat you and vice versa, the world would just be a much more happier place. I think it would also help if there was a decent bottle of wine to share one another as well. But
absolutely, that definitely helps. That's the best way to make friends fast.
It is. But okay, moving on. When it comes to auction, I can imagine you personally have missed the live events. Is there much difference in terms of people being physically present as opposed to virtually? And what have you missed the most since you've last had the Gavel in your hand?
Well, I mean, from a market standpoint, there's been no difference from a results, from an activity, from a percentage sold. In fact, prices have gone up over the past year significantly. So it's really been, no difference. So pivoting to the virtual world has been very quick, very seamless for us. We already had a great bidding platform where people participate live, whether through the app or through the website. You can sit there on your computer, you can sit there on your phone and bid live, and you can even bid during the auction, even if it's for later in the auction. So there's really been no difference. I mean, obviously we miss the camaraderie, the ability to see our clients in person and share wines with them is something that is what we miss the most, So that is from a social standpoint and from a personal connection standpoint, that cannot be replaced. But from a business standpoint, there's been hasn't made a difference.
Okay, very good, very good. And just want a little side note here, actually, because obviously Acker tend to give quite a lot back to the wine community, and I think several months ago we had Christy Norman on as our guest, and she is behind the United Sommeliers Foundation, which Acker, she was a big fan of, again, the commitment you guys have given, to such a cause. And Acker have been very charitable over the years as well. Why is that such an important ethos for Acker? And the reason I ask that, I don't see too much charity being given by other auction houses either.
Well, we just try to give something back. I mean, it's just kind of part of, who we are. And, when the United Sommelier Foundation, we got connected with them through a good friend of mine out in California, and we wanted to do something immediately to help. It's now 1 year later, the government's finally getting around to helping, the restaurants and such with some aid finally. But I mean, it's taken a long time. So we basically jumped right on it a year ago and raised over 400,000 for the USF, and raised awareness that this was a great cause for people that have dedicated their lives rather, to wine, and gotten everything taken away from them. Some of the stories were heartbreaking. People had families and young, and they all of a sudden, had no money, no income, and they were really struggling. So it was nice to bring great awareness to that organization, who's continued to help a lot of people throughout the year. And hopefully, by the end of this year, we'll kind of, I think everybody can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. And, we also still did stuff with City Meals on Wheels in New York, which is an organization that feeds the elderly homebound. A lot of old people, if they're not in nursing homes, they're home. They're alone, and they need people to come check in on them and bring food to them. They can't afford their own food. So, we raised over 10,000 meals this fall for them. And, so we always try to keep it involved with a couple of charities, every year. And we also donate lots to different organizations or, events. And obviously, just something we feel like it's good to give back and not to just always take.
Absolutely, that's incredible. That's incredible. And all right, now not everybody foresaw Southeast Asia playing the role it has in the fine wine market. We touched upon this earlier, but what countries do you see as the next emerging players in the secondary market?
Well, I mean, I think that China still has an enormous amount of potential. I mean, we've unlocked the key and cracked the door open, but I don't think it's fully open by any means. So I think there's still an enormous amount of potential within China and the mainland China, in particular. And obviously some of the other, the BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China's obviously started, Brazil has started, but still enormous potential. Especially Russia and India, I think, have huge potential. And also, some of the Arabian countries where, there's been this, where wine has kind of been a little bit taboo, but as generations changed, and now there's a little more open acceptance to wine, and it's becoming more normal and received there. So I think these areas have a lot of potential. I mean, basically, if you choose to drink alcohol and you can afford to drink, wine, whether it's $10 a bottle or $10,000 a bottle, there really is no better beverage on earth. So I think as more and more people discover wine as time goes on, it's just kind of part of a cultural evolution in general. And I think more people will be drinking it, more people will be collecting it. But the only problem is that we can't make more of the best wines in the world. They're limited. We can't just double the production of Chateau Lafite just because the demand is out there. So it's always going to put this pressure on pricing, as is the fact that people drink it. So supply is dwindling naturally every year. People consume and drink and open bottles. So there's always going to be less of any given wine as time goes on.
For several years, the supposed curtailment of Burgundy growth has been purported, and critics have continued to be wrong as Burgundy is going from strength to strength. Do you see this trend continuing with Burgundy, and what possible changes do you see ahead for Burgundy, if any?
Burgundy is certainly the belle of the ball, and I think the collectors, it's like the last stop on the train of wine collecting. Not everybody takes the train to the final stop, but if you do take it to the end, everybody seems to end up in Burgundy. I mean, there's a certain charm and seduction of the Pinot Noir grape, and also the Chardonnay grape. You have great whites, great reds, and the limited nature of Burgundy and the respect for the terroir and the fact that there's 200 cases of this and there's 100 cases of this and maybe 500 cases of that. I mean, it's just so limited. There's so little of it. So it's just not enough to go around. So in that regards, I think that Burgundy will still always be the most demanded wine forever and ever. I don't see that changing in my lifetime. And right now, I think it's about 50% of the market. I mean, 10 years ago, it was 20% of the market. So you've seen a real flip-flop with Bordeaux and Burgundy as far as market share over the last decade. And I think that that's here to stay. I mean, I think the one thing with Burgundy, as much great Burgundy as there's made, there's also kind of half of Burgundy is outstanding, collectible, and there's another half of Burgundy that could do a lot better, right? So hopefully that other half will change hands, or get better winemakers or owners or people that are more dedicated, because I don't want to say there's a lot of bad Burgundy out there, but there's a lot of Burgundy out there that could be better.
Agreed. And from what you are seeing, what other wine regions are starting to get more market attention, and what should people be keeping their eyes on, and what should collectors be taking more stock of?
Well, I think for white wine, certainly the great German Rieslings, the GGs, the dry style of Riesling that's really happened over the last 20 years has been revolutionary. I mean, I drink these wines all the time at home, and I think they're incredible wines. They age, and of course, Riesling's the other noble grape variety besides Chardonnay. But it's still a lot of people like, oh, it's too sweet. It's not, oh, it's lower in alcohol. It's too sweet. But no, that's your grandfather's Riesling. That's not the Rieslings they're making today. The Grossgewächs, the GG styles, I think are super exciting. Keller's already become, a market fixture. We don't see too much of it, but I mean, when it comes, people are bidding actively for the wines of Keller. So he's kind of the leader. And I think, California has an enormous amount of potential. I think there's a real struggle for identity in California. There are these classic wines that have aged for 30, 40 years, like the Ridges, the Duns, the Dominus, the Heights, and Montelena. And these wines are amazing. And then there became this cult explosion where, the Scream Eagles and Harlans and Colgans. And there's I think all these wines are kind of converging together and finding this balance of, making wines that are age-worthy and also approachable, and kind of the watching those alcohol levels and such, which is the real kind of debate at the moment, what that alcohol level is. But I think California has enormous potential when you think about the fact that really the wine market is as a producing region is really only 50 years old. So it doesn't have the centuries of history and tradition that Bordeaux and Burgundy has. So huge potential still.
Massively. We've got behind, as a firm, California as well. And it's true, because they can age a good 30, 40 years. A lot of them do employ a lot of workers, if you wish, that have worked at the likes of Liéville-Lescasse or Château-Latour or the domains of Burgundy to help them, I suppose, make that old world style but in a new world, and seems to be doing pretty well. But all right, on to a couple more fun questions before we round things up, John. You do drink a lot of great wine, and you are, obviously, a lot of people will be very envious of that. But if there was a fire in your home, not wishing that, of course, but if there was, what is one wine that you would need to sell from your save rather from your cellar?
Yeah, that's it. Well, I drink the wines in my cellar so quickly. I always have to get new shipments in. I mean, if you're talking about the best wines I've ever had, I guess might be, I think the 1945 vintage, all that vintage is the all-time number one for me. I've been blessed to have 45 Mouton a number of times, and that's one of the most incredible wines ever made. I've had a great bottle of 45 Petrus, no doubt about it, perfect condition, which was spectacular. And I've also been blessed to have a 45 Romanée-Conti around 20 years ago, before it was $500,000 a bottle,
Yeah.
which was still the greatest. Back then it was about 25 or 30, and you get 6 guys to split it, and it was okay, So I had one of those, which was probably the best bottle of wine I ever had. So I still defer to the 1945 vintage. But it's exciting to see a lot more wines. I mean, the 20th century's had so many great vintages. It seems like Mother Nature and wine and technology and information are really coming together, where the wines being made today are fantastic, and there's so much more knowledge going into it. But the problem is we got to wait for them. So it's nice to be able to dig back into those ancient wines. Nothing ages like Bordeaux. That's what makes Bordeaux the best, for collecting, because you can age it so much longer than any other wine in the world. It's not to say Burgundy doesn't age. Some great Burgundies age as well, but in general, Bordeaux is the king of the hill for ageability.
Agreed. And obviously, you've got a place of residence in Puerto Rico. I imagine you have a place of residence in New York. Obviously, you did start the In Bond in London initiative. Do you ever see yourself buying a place in London, or would it just be a brief visit and staying in a hotel?
Yeah, I think I like to visit. I was moving around a lot. I was probably traveling half the year until this pandemic hit, and it was kind of a nice reset for me personally. To be like, wait a second, I don't have to run around the world all the time and like a chicken with my head cut off, making things happen, and everything's still happening. Wow, so it's great. I can actually focus on working out and doing things for me at a personal, spending more time with the family and all that good stuff. But the whole, I consider the world to be my home. I like I said, I've traveled extensively for the past 20 years, really waving the flag for the world of fine wine, opening wines, sharing wines. If I probably if I ever tried to tabulate the amount of bottles or the value of the wine that I've consumed, it would probably, it would certainly make my wife angry, I think. But it's just it's been great. We've just sometimes I joke I'm the chief drinking officer, and my number one job is to drink all the profits. But that's what it's about. You got to share it, you got to enjoy it, and you only live once, so you can't do that like looking at it in your inventory 24/7.
All right, last couple of questions, John. Then we'll definitely wrap things up. So, okay. You, again, 1945, you drank a lot of great 45s and a plethora of other legendary brands, vintages. However, putting you on the spot, if you could give 3 wines that would be on your bucket list that you're yet to have, or you have had but were in bad condition and you'd love to be able to taste again, your top 3.
Oh boy, I think I would have to go like 19th century, or some of these, it's tough. Or the old Romanée-Contis, certainly. I mean, I've had some of them, but so few recently. So anything Romanée-Conti, like a 29 or a 21 or a 23, or these kind of years, and some of those 1860 Lafitte's, like the 1865 and 870, that are supposed to be legendary. I've never had those, and so it's just, I think those would obviously those would be it. And there's not too many wines 45 or younger that I are, certainly a Rousseau Chambertin. I'm not sure what the first vintage was, like somewhere in the 19 that. So these kind of historical years, or the first years, would be fun to try a lot of times.
No, definitely. And just lastly, what is on the horizon for Acker? What can people who are watching this and listening to this, can they expect to see throughout the course of the rest of this year and in the future from yourself and Acker in particular?
Well, just more fine and rare wine. We just really feel that we have a lot to offer the world. We have a great global network, across America, Europe, and Asia, and even America North and South. And we just want to bring people and bottles and collectors together and continue to do so. And obviously we have people working for us all over the world now, and we have hubs in New York, and now Delaware. We opened up in Delaware now. We also have in London and Hong Kong and Tokyo and other countries as well. And I think we just want to continue to promote wine, get more people drinking wine, and enhance people's experience and enjoyment with wine. And so that's something we're looking to do, whether it's virtual or physical. How can we do that? And that's what we're always talking about and thinking about moving forward.
Brilliant. Well, John, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your answers, and once again for joining us. So next time you're in London, we'll definitely have to meet up again. And when we're in New York, you can show us what it's all about. And well, thank you once again, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you too. Thank you, and thank you for joining us once again as well. And until next time, all the best.